The void between stars was silent except for the steady hum of the Dominion warship's core. Admiral Carveth reclined in his command chair, a figure of polished arrogance, his scaled hands tapping idly against the armrest as he surveyed the burning remains of another human colony. On the view screen, plumes of flame clawed skyward, homes and outposts reduced to slag. His junior officers chuckled, sharing jibes about the fragile primates who screamed as they died. To them, this war was not a matter of survival or empire, it was sport. Carveth's voice, smooth and disdainful, cut through their laughter. Pathetic. They scatter at the first pressure. Every battle is the same. They burn quickly, like dry reeds. His second-in-command, a broad-shouldered tactician named Varric, inclined his head with a grin. Perhaps that is why command keeps sending us. Crushing prey is efficient for morale. On the surface, human militia forces mounted their last, desperate resistance. Rusting tanks, modified cargo shuttles, soldiers with outmatched rifles. They threw themselves into the fire. Carveth leaned forward slightly, narrowing his eyes as explosions peppered the battlefield. Curious, though, how they fight. Always frantic, always bloody, never surrendering. They know the outcome, and yet, he let the sentence hang, uninterested in pursuing the thought. To him, it was just another curiosity about an inferior race. The militia commander, a gaunt man with ash smeared across his face, was dragged aboard the flagship. Shackled, beaten, but standing straight, Captain Elias Marr was the first human Carveth had ever spoken to face. The admiral circled him like a predator, savoring the weakness he expected to find. Your kind resists with toys. Your colonies crumble. Soon, Earth will fall as well. Why do you waste yourselves for nothing? Elias met his gaze, jaw clenched tight. Blood ran down his temple, but his voice carried iron. You shouldn't have come here. You think you've seen us. You haven't. The bridge hushed. Carveth laughed, sharp and humorless. You're beaten, human. You have no fleets, no allies, no chance. You're wrong about one thing, Elias said, spitting blood onto the polished deck. We don't need allies. We never have. And if you think this ends with us on our knees, you're making the biggest mistake your empire will ever make. Varric barked a laugh. Empty bravado. He gestured for the guards to haul the prisoner away, but something in the man's calm refusal lingered. Not fear, not desperation, something colder. Within hours, the Dominion fleet left the colony smoldering behind them. Their next target was larger, richer, the Sol system itself. Carveth felt no hesitation. Earth was just another hub to torch, another population to enslave. The council in the Dominion capital had insisted this campaign would be short and profitable. He would be the one to deliver its final blow. As their ships cut through the void toward the moon, Carveth reviewed reports of the colony raids. The humans had fought savagely, yes, but inconsistently. Some outposts resisted until their last breath. Others collapsed almost instantly. To Dominion analysts, the conclusion was obvious. Weakness, fragmentation, chaos. Yet when Carveth lingered on the data, something prickled in the back of his mind. Too clean. Too arranged. Almost as if those colonies had been meant to fall. He dismissed the thought. The Dominion had crushed hundreds of species before. Humanity was no different. Still, when his junior officer reported unusual activity near Earth, an abrupt silence in all channels, no pleas, no panic transmissions, Carveth felt his claws tighten against his chair. No traffic at all? He demanded. None, Admiral, the officer replied. Not from military channels, not civilian. It is unnerving. Varric scoffed. They are hiding, too terrified to beg. Better to prepare for surrender. Carveth studied the dark orb of Earth on screen. Its cities glowed faintly beneath the shadow of night, serene and unhurried. The silence did not feel like panic. It felt deliberate. Calculated. His instincts whispered of traps, but arrogance crushed the doubt before it could grow. He turned to his officers, masking unease with disdain. Ready the invasion wings. We will break their homeworld as easily as the rest. Across the bridge, Elias Marr's words still echoed in his memory. You haven't seen us. Carveth straightened, banishing the chill that crawled down his spine. Soon, Earth would burn. The Dominion had faced countless foes and prevailed. Humanity would be no exception. And yet, as the fleet descended toward their target, the stillness of the blue planet felt less like weakness and more like something waiting, watching. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Carveth wondered, not if victory was certain, but if perhaps they had stepped into something far larger than they could control. The Dominion fleet slid into Earth's orbit like a blade meant for slaughter. Admiral Carveth expected chaos, frantic comms, evacuation ships clawing upward, cries for mercy. Instead, there was only silence. Earth hung serene, its continents shadowed by night, its oceans gleaming with indifferent calm. Carveth felt unease curl at the edge of his pride, though he buried it beneath a practiced sneer. So this is the cradle of their species, he murmured. Soon it will be their grave. Orders rippled through the fleet. Assault wings prepared for atmospheric breach. Shields powered. Soldiers laughed in their barracks, trading wagers on how long it would take to break the humans' final defense. Yet the silence pressed heavier with each passing moment. On the bridge, a junior sensor officer frowned, mandibles twitching. Admiral, readings are strange. No broadcasts, no defensive chatter. And his claws froze over the console. There are structures in orbit, unregistered satellites. Many of them. Carveth leaned forward. Identify them. The officer hesitated. They are dark. No emissions. But their placement, precisely distributed across the orbital plane. As if. A tremor cut through the ship as a nearby cruiser exploded in silence, torn apart by an invisible strike. Alarms howled. Dozens of dark satellites came alive at once, unmasking as railgun platforms and kinetic launchers, hidden in plain sight. Massive projectiles, unseen until impact, streaked through the Dominion formation with merciless accuracy. On the bridge, chaos erupted. Varric barked countermeasures, demanding evasive patterns, but every maneuver was anticipated. Another Dominion destroyer split open like paper, its hull venting soldiers into the void. Carveth gripped his chair, cold realization seeping into his bones. This was no last-ditch defense. This was preparation. A human voice cut through the comms, calm and steady. It spoke not in panic but in control. Dominion fleet, you've trespassed far enough. Leave our skies, or we will end you here. The words were not shouted. They were measured, unhurried, like a verdict already passed. Carveth's scales prickled. He forced a sneer. Patch me through. I will answer this, insect. The comms opened, revealing a human commander. Stern, unblinking, his uniform crisp, his tone detached. This is Fleet Marshal Arjun Rao of Earth Defense Command. You believed our colonies were prey. They were bait. You've been studied. Now you are finished. Carveth tried laughter, but it wavered. You think a handful of hidden weapons changes the balance? You are nothing compared to the Dominion's strength. Rao tilted his head slightly, as though considering whether to waste more words. Strength without discipline is noise. You'll discover the difference. The channel cut. Precision strikes followed his words. Orbital cannons fired in perfect sequence, crippling Dominion vessels before they could regroup. Wormhole distortions flickered at the edges of the system, human ships emerging silently, their hulls angular and dark, bristling with weapons the Dominion had never catalogued. They didn't move like prey. They moved like hunters, confident and patient. On the bridge, Varric shouted, Admiral, we must retreat to regroup. This is a trap. Carveth's pride screamed at the suggestion. But as another cruiser vanished in a fireball, he hesitated. Retreat was survival, yet retreat was also shame. His gaze flicked to the tactical display. Every Dominion maneuver was countered before it formed. Rao hadn't been exaggerating. They were not reacting, they were orchestrating. The Admiral's thoughts turned sharp. Had the humans orchestrated every colony's fall? The uneven resistance, the scattered defenses, it had all been too erratic. perhaps deliberate, designed to lure the Dominion deeper, to feed them an illusion of superiority until Earth itself was threatened. He recalled Elias Marr, the human prisoner, standing bloodied yet calm. "You haven't seen us." The memory hit like a blade. The Dominion flagship shuddered violently as a projectile skimmed its shields. Sparks rained across the bridge. Carveth's crew looked to him, waiting for orders, their arrogance cracking under the weight of fear. For the first time in his long career, Carveth's voice faltered. "Withdraw. Form what remains and pull back beyond lunar orbit." The command spread like fire. Ships veered, engines blazing. But their retreat was hounded at every step, human drones emerging from hidden hangars, swarms of autonomous craft intercepting fleeing Dominion vessels. There was no mercy, only precise containment, as if humanity were tightening a net around a wounded predator. When the surviving ships finally broke free, the Dominion fleet was half its former strength. Silence filled the flagship's bridge, punctuated only by the ragged breaths of officers who had never known such defeat. Carveth rose slowly, the weight of what had just transpired pressing down with unbearable clarity. Varric's voice shook. They knew. From the beginning. This wasn't desperation, it was strategy. Carveth did not answer. His gaze was fixed on the stars behind them, yet his mind replayed Rao's calm words, Elias Marr's warning, the impossible precision of the human assault. The Dominion had mistaken silence for fear. But it had been the silence of calculation, of teeth bared in shadow. He finally spoke, voice low. "We have awakened something we do not understand." As the flagship limped toward safety, Carveth felt the first true seed of fear root itself deep in his chest. Humanity had revealed only the edge of its power, yet that edge had torn through the Dominion's pride like brittle glass. And though retreat bought him time, it offered no comfort. He could not shake the certainty that Earth had not defended itself in desperation. It had simply revealed the beginning of its plan. The galaxy would soon discover the difference. The Dominion Senate chamber was a cavernous arena of glass and obsidian, meant to project strength. Tonight, it reeked of unease. Reports of Earth's defense had arrived in fragments, burning cruisers, vanished destroyers, commanders begging for orders before their voices were cut into static. Yet the senators hissed and jeered, their arrogance clinging to them like armor. High Chancellor Erix rose, his jeweled crest shimmering under the lights. "Is this what terrifies you?" he demanded, waving a claw over the holo display of Earth's orbit. "Primitive weapons, a few hidden cannons, tricks to mask their weakness? Shall we tremble before a backwater species that bleeds as easily as vermin?" The chamber erupted in agreement. Only a handful remained silent, their faces shadowed by doubt. Among them sat Admiral Carveth, still scarred from the disastrous retreat. His uniform was torn at the shoulder, his composure frayed. He had always spoken with biting certainty, but now his voice was low, grim. "You mock what you do not understand." They did not stumble upon victory. They arranged it. Every colony they allowed us to burn was a calculation. We walked into a net they wove long before we arrived. A senator sneered. "You lost your fleet to farmers with slings. Should we trust the judgment of failure?" Carveth's tail lashed, but his voice sharpened. "Failure is why I see clearly. You still mistake silence for fear. I tell you, humanity has studied us. They fight with history older and bloodier than our empire. I saw it in their eyes. They know war in a way we cannot fathom." But the chamber dismissed him. Votes carried on momentum, on pride, on the certainty of superiority. More fleets were ordered to Earth. More soldiers conscripted. The Dominion would crush the humans in a show of force so vast no primitive tricks could matter. Yet beneath the surface, cracks spread. Civilian networks buzzed with rumors. Why had half a fleet not returned? Why did the reports vanish as quickly as they appeared? Fear rippled through colonies at the fringe, where whispers claimed humans had technologies unseen, weapons that bent space itself. Those whispers proved true. When the Second Dominion fleet entered a border system to regroup, the stars themselves tore open. Wormholes flared like wounds, and human ships emerged in perfect formation. They did not challenge openly. They struck at supply vessels, crippled communications, severed escorts from their commanders. Drones swarmed like locusts, not seeking glory, but efficiency. A battle that should have lasted hours was decided in minutes. The Dominion left blind and fractured while the humans withdrew, without a single casualty. Admiral Carveth, monitoring the disaster from afar, felt the same dread hollow his chest. Humanity was not simply resisting. They were teaching the Dominion a lesson with every strike. He imagined Rao, that calm-eyed human commander, watching him like a predator measuring the weaknesses of prey. When Carveth closed himself in his quarters, he accessed forbidden archives. Human broadcasts captured during earlier raids, dismissed as cultural clutter. He studied them now, seeking answers. Images of old wars filled his screen, trenches soaked in mud, skies choked with bombers, cities consumed by nuclear fire. He saw men and women marching, dying, rebuilding, only to march again. The wars never ceased. They only changed shape. Guerrillas with nothing but rifles drove out empires. Nations obliterated each other with weapons that scarred planets. Carveth's claws trembled as he absorbed it. They practice war, he whispered to the empty room. They practice on themselves. The realization was a blade through his pride. Humanity was not untested. They were the most battle-forged species he had ever encountered. Their restraint, their silence, had not been signs of weakness, but discipline honed across millennia of conflict. And still, the Senate laughed. In another session, Carveth warned them, his voice raw. You treat this as rebellion. It is not. It is awakening. They will not stop. They will not negotiate. They will burn through us until we are dust, because that is how they survive. High Chancellor Eric smirked. And what would you have us do, Admiral? Bend knee to these primitives? Hand them dominion of the stars. Carveth's silence was answer enough. The chamber rang with scoffs. Votes passed. Orders sealed. Another wave of fleets was sent toward human territory, even as colonies along the frontier began to falter. Garrisons reported civilians refusing orders. Some defected outright, broadcasting pleas to humanity for protection. The Dominion had ruled for centuries through fear, but fear was shifting. Fear now had a new name, humanity. Carveth left the chamber hollow. He walked the corridors alone, shadows clinging to his stride. He remembered Elias Marr, that human captain they had mocked, standing bloodied yet unbroken. He remembered Rao's voice, calm as stone, delivering promises like prophecies. And he wondered if perhaps, for the first time, the Dominion was not the hunter in this story at all. As reports of fresh defeats trickled in, communications severed, fleets evaporating, colonies pledging loyalty to Earth, Carveth felt the truth solidify in his bones. The war was already lost. The only question that remained was how much of the Dominion would be left to bury its dead when humanity was finished. The Dominion core system had always been considered untouchable. Its skies were laced with defense grids, its worlds fortified with orbital rings that gleamed like crowns of iron. Generations of rulers had proclaimed it the center of galactic order, the heart that beat unchallenged across the stars. Yet as dawn rose over the capital world, wormholes split the sky like wounds, and humanity arrived in silence. There were no warning speeches, no parades of banners. Human fleets emerged in precise formation, shadows against the light, their movements orchestrated with an elegance that made them seem less like armies and more like inevitability. Admiral Carveth stood on the Dominion command tower, his throat dry as he watched the impossible unfold. Every defense that had been boasted about for centuries activated at once, beams of fire lancing into the void. And yet the human fleets did not falter. They absorbed the storm, vanished into wormholes, and reappeared behind the very platforms meant to shield the capital. Orbital rings crumbled, explosions painting the heavens. Panic gripped the Dominion command. Officers screamed over each other, voices cracking with desperation. Where are the reserves? Where are the interceptors? But the answers came only as static or silence. Autonomous human drones swarmed in numbers uncountable, tearing through ships and stations alike. Precision, always precision, no wasted fire, no desperate maneuvers. Humanity was not fighting for glory. Humanity was dismantling an empire. Karvatha's claws dug into the railing. He had tried to warn them. He had seen the pattern long before this day, and yet his words had been drowned beneath laughter. Now, as the sky collapsed above them, those same senators who had mocked him shouted into comms for surrender, their voices ignored, cut off mid-transmission by the collapse of their networks. The galaxy's masters were reduced to terrified whispers. From the main viewport, a transmission broke through. Marshal Rao appeared, his image clear, his tone calm. He did not gloat. He did not taunt. Dominion command, this is your final notice. Lay down your arms. Humanity does not seek vengeance, but we will not hesitate to finish this war. You began it. We will end it. His words, simple and measured, carried more weight than any threat. Karvath felt the silence settle across the room. The senators, the generals, the commanders, every eye turned to him. Perhaps it was instinct, perhaps desperation, but they waited for his answer. He lowered his head. We cannot win, he said, voice raw. They have already broken us. Survival means surrender. No one argued. Pride had evaporated, replaced by the suffocating certainty of annihilation. Orders were relayed. Dominion fleets began to shut down their weapons, their shields falling one by one. Across the system, the war ended not with a final roar, but with a long, reluctant exhale. When the first human ships descended, they did not land in triumph. They landed with cold efficiency, establishing control, securing infrastructure, dismantling the last fragments of resistance. Soldiers in dark armor moved with the same calm as their commanders, offering terms, never raising their voices. There were no parades, no speeches of conquest. Only silence, broken occasionally by the crackle of translated orders. Karvath stood before Marshal Rao in the shattered Senate chamber. The marble floor was cracked, banners torn, the once grand hall dimmed to a ruin. Rao regarded him not with hatred, but with a steady, unreadable gaze. Karvath, stripped of command, armor scorched, lowered his crest in resignation. You could have killed us all, he said quietly. You could have burned our worlds as we burned yours. Why didn't you? Rao studied him, then answered in the same calm tone as always. Because this war was never about revenge. We wanted peace. You mistook it for weakness. Now peace will be enforced because we cannot allow you or anyone to do this again. Karvath felt the words like chains tightening around him. Yet there was something else beneath them. Not mercy, not cruelty, but inevitability. Humanity was not here to rule out of spite. They were here because the galaxy had left them no other choice. You would make us subjects, Karvath said bitterly. No, Rao replied. We will make you responsible. You will govern your people, but under our watch. Learn what restraint means. Learn what survival means. Or lose everything. For the first time in his career, Karvath bowed his head willingly. He had once believed the Dominion was eternal. Now he understood it would survive only as an echo under human oversight. He accepted the role they offered, not as admiral, not as conqueror, but as governor of a broken people who would either adapt or vanish. Days later, the transmission spread across every world of the Dominion. Humanity's voice, united and clear, reached every ear. We did not seek this war. You forced us to awaken. Now the galaxy will know order, not the Dominions, but one forged from survival. We will not attack without cause. But if provoked, we will end any threat. Remember this. Restraint is not weakness. It is power held in reserve. The words rippled outward, carrying a weight that history would not forget. Across fractured colonies and rebellious systems, silence followed. Fear, yes, but also something else, recognition. The old galactic order was gone, shattered in less than a year. In its place stood a species that had been dismissed, mocked, underestimated. Humanity had stepped onto the stage, and nothing would ever be the same. Carveth, in the quiet of his quarters, replayed ancient human footage he had once studied in horror. Soldiers in mud, cities in flames, civilians carrying banners through rubble. He saw again the endless cycle of destruction and rebuilding, the resilience that had once seemed madness. Now he understood. Humanity did not merely survive war.
They were shaped by it, sharpened by it.
It was their crucible, their inheritance. As he turned off the display, Carveth whispered to himself, "We wanted war. We thought it would amuse us. But they are war." Far above, the stars stretched endless and cold. Humanity had won not with fury but with precision, not with pride but with discipline. They had not celebrated victory, because victory was never their goal. Their goal was survival. And now, with survival secured, they looked outward, toward the infinite night. The galaxy trembled, not because humanity had conquered it, but because humanity had finally stopped pretending to be fragile.